All right. Well, let's make this official. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, our inaugural Agile Education Program webinar. As I said before, I'm Tom Bullock, Scrumming's Chief Storyteller. And our goal with this series is pretty simple: to help you deliver more value faster. This webinar is brought to you in partnership with our authorized Agile education providers. You can find trusted Agile education training no matter where you are in the world. From Beijing to Argentina, Japan to the United States, you can count on our authorized Agile education providers to deliver high-quality training and help you bring true agility to your organization. Our AAEPs are here live in the chat, and they can also be reached via our website, agileeducation.org/partners. Next, I'm going to answer a common question we've already answered, but it's a good one. We will be posting an on-demand recording of this webinar at agileeducation.org, and you will also be getting, as a registrant, an email about it. And today, we launched this series by challenging a common misconception that when it comes to scaling frameworks, you must choose one and stick to just that one. Our featured guests disagree with that concept, and they have their recently published peer-reviewed IEEE white paper as proof that they're right. Dr. Jeff Sutherland is the co-creator of Scrum, creator of Scrum at Scale, and a signatory of the Agile Manifesto, really an individual who needs very little introduction. Joining him is Michael Simmons, an enterprise Agile coach and trainer with Scrum Inc. He is also a registered Scrum at Scale trainer with our Agile education program. Michael brings decades of experience helping organizations drive better outcomes. Their white paper, co-authored with Rocket Mortgage, is titled Rocket Mortgage Delivers Twice the Value at Half the Cost at Scale. Now, Jeff and Michael will be taking questions throughout this presentation, so please be sure to use the Q&A feature to submit your questions so we can track them. You'll see that button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Jeff Sutherland and Michael Simmons. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you coming here. I wanted to say that it was an honor to write this paper with Dr. Sutherland. And when he offered me the opportunity, said if I was interested, it's like, come on, let me think about it. Okay. We did it in collaboration with David Wan and David Negron from Rocket Mortgage. The two of them did an amazing job on this very large scale Scrum at Scale transformation. And this paper, as Tom mentioned, it was something that we were able to look at and say, okay, so everyone says, well, you got to choose Kanban, or you got to choose Scrum, or you have to choose SAFe. Well, here there was a SAFe implementation, and then David Wan and David Negron's group called Client Marketing, they took and added Scrum at Scale on top of that. And that was very exciting. And so we're going to talk about what they did, how they did it, and the results they achieved. And we're talking in very specific terms here. There's not a lot of theory. So you could take these things that we're going to discuss and you can apply them yourself in your own Scrum at Scale transformations or your existing Scrum at Scale environment. So Rocket Mortgage launched its product during the 2016 Super Bowl. And by 2017, it was the largest mortgage originator in the United States. Huge in a very short period of time. And a lot of times companies get really big and they just become non-responsive, cable company. And Rocket Mortgage didn't do that. So Rocket Mortgage, for 11 years in a row by J.D. Powers, remained number one in client satisfaction in mortgage origination. They really strive to take care of their clients in a big, big way. So within Rocket Mortgage, there's a group called Client Marketing. And that's where David Wan and David Negron are from. And so that's the money makers, because they're the front end of the mortgage website. So this is where people go when they say, I want to get a mortgage. This is the part where if it's not working, Rocket Mortgage doesn't make money. This paper is about them and their journey. We're going to start off with Rocket Mortgage as a whole. So the company as a whole said all of our technology groups are going to come together in a one unified way of working. What they had at the time, they had the 8 technology-centered platforms. So the teams were centered around a technology, not value streams. And because of that, there were almost total autonomy. Everyone was operating differently, right? So you had traditional project management over here, you had Kanban over here, you had XP over here, you had Scrum, but, right? We'll do everything in Scrum, but this. And another thing is they had 275 high priority work items that they called epics. So the way this worked was that these 275 epics at a very high level, they would meet every quarter. The senior managers would meet every quarter and they would discuss these epics. And then they would filter down what they wanted to do to the teams. However, because everyone was doing their own thing, in the process of this filtering down to the teams, by the time the teams got the work and they had their own initiatives and things they were working on, there was no prioritization. So they were misaligned, a lot of methodologies and very disparate processes. So Rocket Mortgage implemented SAFe to do that. So an important part about this is everyone changed at the same time. They started in Q3 of 2018 and they ended in Q4 of 2018, a really, really short period of time, considering all their technology teams did this. They did a really great job. So they realigned from 8 technology capability-centered platforms to 23 value-focused release trains. They also call them streams. They used DevOps roadmaps for each release train, and they tracked their progress on DevOps wheel. They standardized a pipeline so that large-scale initiatives, large scale in this case meaning it spans more than one release train, large-scale initiatives had a standardized pipeline to make their way into the software development cycle. So they were putting everything in order from inception down to the people doing the work. They also created some integrations with some of their work tracking tools, and that gave them visibility and metrics in real time. That was very important in the success of this Scaled Agile framework implementation. What they ended up achieving were really great results. So you can see that their feature cycle time dropped by 53%. Feature throughput went up 101%. The standard deviation dropped by 49%. And the reliability, we're going to commit to this. How often do we meet that commitment? It went up by 47%. These are really great numbers. So what we're going to show you now is how layering Scrum and Scale on top of this make the results significantly better. So to do this, we're going to look at the implementation of client marketing.
Okay, so client marketing front end, they make all the money. There's where the customers come in, they want changes. Okay, so they, even though the SAFe implementation has doubled their capability, still was not responsive enough to customers. So they wanted to take a look at ramping that. And the 2 principals at Rocket Mortgage came to a Scrum Scale training. They did the heat map at Scrum Scale training. We build a column for every person, company in the room. 2 of those columns in that chart are Rocket Mortgage. You can see green is great and red is not good. And you can see there's a lot of red on that board, which is typical. By looking at the board, you can then prioritize targeting improvement in the organization. So what we want to do is talk about what Rocket Mortgage identified in Scrum at Scale, but also they went to the Scrum at Scale the trainer course, and they actually became Scrum at Scale trainers to implement it in their organization. When they prioritize the dysfunction in the organization, the safe implementation, even though it was a good one, they had too many inconsistent tools and techniques that were actually blocking faster deployment. They had a lot of meetings and a lot of job titles that were not focused on delivery. So they needed to shift the whole organization into a delivery focus. And that meant better communications. It actually meant reduced number of roles and reduced number of meetings, and every meeting focused on delivery in order to reduce the cycle time. So Scrum Scale allowed them to really drill into what was preventing them from going faster. So go ahead and move on here, Michael. When they looked at what the people were doing, they found they were saying they were doing Scrum, but they were inconsistent with the Scrum Guide. And the Scrum Guide, it has the minimum requirements for performance. So if you are not aligned with those performance parameters, you're going to be slow. The other thing was 15 separate job titles for a team. And we know, we learned in the 1980s from Bell Labs that you need to have actually no job titles. That's the way the first Scrum team started off. We eliminated the job titles. And we reduced the number of roles to 3, the product owner, the Scrum Master, and a team member. The third piece of it was the meetings. The meetings were set up in a way that the organization was not performance driven. An example was they had these meetings every day, but they were like project management meetings. They didn't know what the teams were doing or what their impediments were. So a lot of the time was wasted. People didn't come to the meetings. So they had to have a really good daily Scrum stand-up flowing in to a daily Scrum of Scrums where they had addressed the impediments of the teams that were blocking shipping at the end of the sprint. They also, in that process, then learned that their infrastructure was set up where there were bottlenecks. And so they had to systematically eliminate the bottlenecks driving production. And many of those bottlenecks had to do with unnecessary roles, too many roles, people outside the teams responsible for part of the deployment, which would create handoffs and slow down. So they had to eliminate all of that stuff. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
So the process and the people. So one of the 2 areas that client marketing addressed are things related to the people. So let's look at what they did. First, they looked at, hey, be agile, follow the Scrum guides. What they found in investigation was that as many as 50% of the teams had greatly modified 4 of the 5 Scrum events, making them completely useless. Additionally, the Scrum Master and product owner accountabilities, they were not followed. They had morphed into doing clerical work or being a pseudo project manager and various things such as that. So they reverted back to following the Scrum Guide. Another thing they found is that the Scrum roles or the non-Scrum roles were causing a big problem. As Dr. Sutherland mentioned, they had as many as 15 unique roles on a team. So they said there are only going to be 3, Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Developer. And that was following the Scrum Guide. Then they looked at following the Scrum at Scale Guide. We know they have to have their teams ready before they can scale. Otherwise, you're going to scale bad instead of scaling Scrum. And lastly, they eliminated everything that was not part of these 2 guides. You said, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and we know it will work.
So quick question. We have a couple of questions, gentlemen, if I may. I want to go to something that John wrote. John asks, how long did the SAFe implementation take before they came to focus on Scrum at Scale for further improvements?
The SAFe implementation only took a quarter. They started in 3rd quarter, ended in 4th quarter. It happened very quickly. The Scrum Scale didn't start immediately. Dr. Sutherland can speak more to that. He actually trained them.
Yeah, the Scrum Scale started, I think, about 6 months after the SAFE implementation started. Because the SAFE was not producing high enough performance and delivery for the front end of the system to respond adequately to customer needs.
Okay. And one final one, just because we have a couple of questions about the metrics, which I think adds context here, is Zita, and I hope I pronounced that name correctly, asked, how did they measure those metrics, like feature cycle time, feature throughput, forecast reality? Can you give us just a brief example or brief understanding of how they were measuring those? Is it just deploys?
We'll show you later in a later slide, but one of the unique features of Rocket Mortgage is they have massive amounts of data, all stored in a huge Deere implementation. So it was one of the best data resources we've seen in companies.
Excellent. All right, gentlemen, I look forward to continuing on with the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So the next thing they addressed was roles. And you can hear this theme repeated as we're speaking, because it really played a significant part of what was slowing them down and how they sped up. And I want to make sure that we remember speeding up by itself is not a good thing. Speeding up and keeping your quality at or higher is what is a good thing. And we always want to make sure our quality improves and never suffers. And we don't like it to stay static either. So with the client marketing, they realized that, again, there were too many specialized roles on the team. And what they did is they, again, implemented just 3 Scrum roles. An important thing of what they did was with QAs and BAs. There were a lot of QAs and BAs on the teams, and they were considered non-delivery roles because they're not putting something out the door. The QAs and BAs were given an opportunity and helped to become developers on the team. Those who didn't want to or were just not able to do so no one lost their job. They were simply moved to a specialty testing group. And the other QAs and BAs became devs and remained on the team. And again, keeping with the 3 roles and making sure that they had delivery roles. Before they started, they had 2 non-delivery roles for every 1 delivery role. So 2 people for every dev. After they finished, they had 1 person to every 2 devs, non-delivery to delivery. And that's a pretty significant change. And
okay, so let's talk about the process itself. Just dig into that. With the SAFE implementation, there were significant testing delays. When they started off, they were on 3-month release cycles. And they knew they needed to get down to at least every sprint, 2 weeks, and then drive it into even shorter time frames. And the problem was the coordination was not good enough. Engineers were confused, too many handoffs, too much breakage, delays all over the place. Not a delivery focus for the entire organization, okay? So in the client marketing Scrum at Scale improvements, they identified not only the organizational changes, getting the right Scrum Masters in place that could actually improve team performance, getting the right product owners in place that could actually drive higher value delivery at lower cost, but the entire infrastructure had to be altered so that there were no bottlenecks in the deployment cycle. And so for every testing delay they had to systematically prioritize them and eliminate them. No one outside the team blocking anything in deployment. The team had to be able to deploy themselves with no interference. So the release plan went from initially months, they got it down to once every 2 week sprints. But the client marketing now with Scrum at Scale is driving releases on demand by really good automated continuous integration, continuous deployment, the release cadence was shortened to a daily cycle. They can release every day a completely new development release. To do that, they had to eliminate any meetings that were not focused on releases. Anything that was not delivering real value had to be stopped. Information had to be immediate, real-time, accurate. Any meeting that was loosely attended was eliminated. We don't have time for that. And so only the meetings that made the deliveries happen faster were kept. And the Scrum Scale outlines the minimum viable bureaucracy you need to coordinate a set of teams. And so they reduce the overhead down to the minimum possible to get the alignment, focus, and execution they needed. So, okay, you're going to take the section. Go ahead.
Sorry, Dr. Sutherland. Yes, so they focused on what really mattered. As Dr. Sutherland mentioned, they looked at the people and the process. For the people, they needed to be agile. To do that, they simply followed the Scrum Guide and the Scrum at Scale Guide. It really was that simple. They got rid of everything else. There were too many specialized roles. Again, we go back to the Scrum Guide, and they stuck to those roles. And they eliminated waste. Again, as Dr. Sutherland mentioned, and I'm sure every single person in here has way too many meetings, and half of them they're busy playing Candy Crush or surfing, Amazon.com. I don't do that in our company, by the way, Dr. Sutherland, ever. And the process is they actually had to make some infrastructure changes to accommodate being able to work faster because they were bottlenecked at testing, which bottlenecked releases. And all of that helped in the entire picture. So let's look at the results of this entire picture, right? And bear in mind, these things that we're showing you on the screen are very basic. They're very simple. There's no special magic thing here. It just takes the discipline to follow them. So the results, these are cycle time reductions. Now, this is not in the paper, and I wanted to share this with you. If you look here, this is April 2017, 2018, 2019, and then 2020. And then over here is December 2020. And you can see that the number drops down the cycle time from 83 days to 71 to 31 to 24, and then down to 13.2 and actually 11.6, sorry. Yeah. So this is significant. And we're going to look at the significance that this had and how they achieved it. This chart is in the paper, and I'd like to explain it. It's very simple and very powerful if you know what it means. This top blue line here, this is their cycle time. So the lower it is, the better. This bottom blue line are their delivery versus non-delivery roles. The higher this bar, the worse it is. You want this bar also to be down because these are non-delivery roles that are working within client marketing. So here you can see the non-delivery roles slowly going up in this period one. And you can see this bar generally trending upwards as well. Here, this is where they started eliminating those roles, converting QAs and BAs into developers. And so there was a quick drop and then a nice gradual downward decline as they were trained and became developers. And you can see right here, this same decline. In fact, it's right to this point where this black bar is. And so this was direct impact of not having so many roles and saying, we just have developers, they're developers. Then you do see this bar go up. The reason it goes up is because the teams, they're adding more teams as they're growing. And so because they're adding more teams, they have more non-delivery roles in the department. And so it does go up, but it's going up because they're adding more Scrum teams who are operating properly Thus, the cycle time continues to drop. And this is my favorite thing about this entire study.
Yeah. This is a great picture because it shows you scaling the number of teams and simultaneously the delivery time is going down as you're scaling.
Yes, absolutely.
That is what shows you your scaling is working. Okay. You almost never see that.
No, as Dr. Sutherland said, the amount of data they had, and this top chart is a direct export from their system. It's just magnificent. So if we go now, what are the numbers, right? What did they achieve by having a great Scrum at Scale implementation, a great safe implementation across the company, and then putting Scrum at Scale on top of that? So the client marketing team's results are here. They went down 86%, 340% for feature throughput, standard deviation, 83%, and reliability, 120%. These numbers are huge. So this shows what client marketing achieved from day one before SAFe was implemented till after SAFe and then Scrum at Scale were implemented. So this is after Scrum at Scale from nothing. If we move forward one more slide, I want to show you the numbers in comparison. On the left is the company average after the SAFe implementation. These are really great numbers. We saw these earlier. On the right is client marketing after Scrum at Scale. They got these. And then this third column shows that Scrum at Scale created an additional 59% improvement over what they got from SAFe. 237 improvement over what they achieved from SAFe. That's what this third column is. So all of these numbers are great. This and showing that, yes, you can still have two things existing.
Jeff, Michael, thank you for that. We've got a number of good questions, and I'm going to do my best to get to all of them, and I'm going to break them into some categories so we can kind of address them into groups. The first, and I mean, this is obviously to the heart of both the white paper and this presentation, and it deals with the base system, the implementation of the Scaled Agile framework that then Scrum at Scale was layered on top of. And we've seen some themes in this question. The first, and I'd be very curious to hear what you both have to say here, is, and this is a common one, was the SAFe implementation done according to SAFe? Was it done properly in the standard ways, or was it incomplete in some way?
Well, this SAFe implementation is one of the best in the world. We've looked at a lot of SAFe case studies. There are some really good ones, but they're typically much smaller than this. We've never seen a SAFe implementation with this many teams deliver such impressive results. So this paper is not about saying SAFe is bad. It's about saying you can do 4 times better than the best SAFe implementation in the world by implementing process improvement based on Scrum at Scale.
And along that line, which is fascinating because, again, you have a successful, by all metrics, including the ones that you showed, successful SAFe implementation that gets even better when you layer Scrum at Scale on top. That interface between SAFe and Scrum at Scale was another thing that we saw. Was there pieces of SAFe that you had to remove for Scrum at Scale to be layered on top, or did they actually mesh?
There are too many roles in SAFe. They had 15 roles per team. We cut it to 3. The way the meetings are set up in SAFe are not optimal. So we had to eliminate meetings and then reorganize meetings. SAFe does not have a strong enough delivery focus. The team needs to deliver the set of teams, the whole scaled implementation needs to deliver a new total release, all teams together every day or more often at the end of this, right? We have seen some small SAFe implementation that have implemented completely automated testing and deployment that have been able to do this, but only one or two in the world, and just very strong DevOps, total automation, few teams. They've been able to deliver every day. But in general, what we see is maybe in a large scaled implementation, you get a 10 to 20% improvement. And we're looking here like for 8 times faster, right? Not 20%.
One of the, to add to that, so one of the big things is PI planning. It's a huge event. It happens on a periodic basis. And I was talking to David about it. And so what they said, because they were still tied to SAFe, right? And the PI planning, they, over a period of about 6 months, replaced with a Metascrum. And Metascrum is part of Scrum at Scale. And the reason he said they ended up finally doing that and departing straight to Scrum at Scale eventually was that they needed the instant and full-time planning and communication instead of waiting for a long period of time and then having a planning session.
Okay. I want to get into some of the roles. Obviously, that was one of the insights that we focused on. And your key takeaway there was keep it to the baseline framework of Scrum that is then grown out with Scrum at Scale, not adding more, but growing that into a fractal scaling out. There are a few questions here. So the first one is actually about the team itself. And the question is, do you know, and this is a large number of teams, so you may not be able to answer this question, and that's okay, but I'm curious if you knew if the teams were on-site co-located or dispersed among many different time zones.
I believe there was some dispersal of teams, but their headquarters in Detroit. Most of the development is located in Detroit. So, but for a similar high-speed global deployment, we wrote a paper in 2008 and 9, again, IEEE peer-reviewed digital library paper on CSC Dynex. Got the same results with dozens of teams spread across multiple continents. Every team was half on one continent and half on another. So every single team was a remote team. Teams were spread all over the world. They got exactly the same results as Rocket Mortgage. So this is what we want to see. And we published 8 other papers for similar teams, most of them deployed between Europe and India or San Francisco, India. And if it's done properly, as we explain here, you get similar results.
I'd like to add to that, if I may. What client marketing did, they called it a Scrum Reset, is how they termed it. And they said, we're going back to the Scrum Guide, only the Scrum Guide, and nothing more than the Scrum Guide. Because after they had implemented SAFe, they still had these issues. And those are the 4 main issues that they tackled by going to the people and the processes. And so by going back to the Scrum Guide, that's when they said, we're only going to get our individual teams in order because we can't scale until we get the Scrum team operating properly. And once they did that, they simply replicated it. And that's how they moved out Scrum at Scale. There was nothing new to add. They had done it with one team, and then they just replicated the exact same thing.
It's that classic need to build a foundation before you build the structure. You really need that core set so you can scale organically with Scrum at Scale as it goes. Is that a fair way to say it, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to focus in now on 2 other roles here, Scrum Master and the product owner roles. And we've seen some questions about really, this isn't just about this case study, but just overall questions about how they fit in a dual operating system with a network and a hierarchy. One question in particular asks, what should you do when you have a hierarchical organization overlapping with the Agile network and you don't have full-time POs or SMs, because that's product owner and Scrum Master, forgive me, because they're getting pulled into the hierarchy and the network is how I'm reading that question.
Well, if you have that situation, you're dysfunctional And if you read Professor Carter's book called Accelerate, he says he has never seen a successful long-term agile transformation with this problem. It's always failed 100% of the time eventually. So one of the problems for people, your mindset has to shift and go to the right way. So for example, there's a question on the board, what percentage of the day is work time versus meeting time? Okay, that is an old mindset. In this world, 100% of the day is work time. The only meetings you have is a 15-minute daily scrum. And at the beginning of the scrum, you have a sprint planning. And at the end, you have a review and retrospective. That's it. The only other time you'd have a meeting is what a couple of developers get together to work together to get something done. Everything is done focused, okay? So if you have Scrum Masters that are not Scrum Masters, what they did in Rocket Mortgage, if a Scrum Master could not totally focus and improve team performance, they were moved out of the release train. If a product owner was not totally focused, got really good backlog that delivered twice the value at half the cost, if the product owner could not do that, they were removed and they were moved out of the release train. Now, what did the managers do? The middle managers led the transformation. They said, we're not going to have Scrum Masters that are not focused and delivering. We're going to remove them. We're not going to have product owners that are not focused and delivering more value. We're going to remove them. That is the management's responsibility. We're not going to have any hierarchical mess up of the agility because we're going to deliver every single day a new release. There's going to be nobody in the way. And the middle managers made sure that that happened. So they would do the blocking and tackling and the fighting with the rest of the management to keep them out of the way so that they could deliver, okay? This is what Agile means. You're focused on delivery 100% of the time, and the role of management is to make sure that happens. And if they don't do that, the Agile transformation will fail. 53% of Agile transformations fail, and 67% of those companies go out of business. This is serious, people. You have to get focused.
So one thing I'd like to add here too, and because we've seen a lot of questions about the Scrum Master in particular, is for those interested in scaling the Scrum Master and learning all of those patterns, tactics, and techniques, Scrum Inc. does have a new course that's launching in March. That's the Scrum Master at Scale. And we have lots of information on our website, scrumming.com. Please check it out there. It's a phenomenal course that answers a lot of these questions because it shows that interplay and that interaction and actually gives you workable ways to be able to solve these yourself, which is phenomenal. I want to go back also, Jeff and Michael, just one more question on middle managers. And this is an interesting one, and it builds off what you were just saying, Jeff. And the question is, in what ways did the decision rights of middle managers change when Scrum at Scale was layered over SAFe? And it's that decision rights. Did they change what they were focused on? Did their authority shift in ways that are worth exploring?
There's only one good paper I've seen in the IEEE library that was written. I was a co-author, but it was written by two Europeans on a Finnish company, and it was on the management. How did the management change when they did an agile transformation across the company? And the managers said they had to move from management to leadership. That means they no longer did any micromanagement at all. They set the direction for the company. They looked at the impediments that were floating up, and their job was to clean up the company and remove the impediments that were blocking the teams in any way. So they said it was a big challenge for them to move from being a micromanager to being a leader in agile transformation. That's what needs to happen. They need to start leading. and helping to make things work. That means I've done this in 13 different companies now myself. Okay, so I'm the manager. I want to know every day what's going on with the Scrum teams. What do they need that they're not getting? And my work every day is providing those teams what they need. And a lot of it is removing problems that are blocking them. Mm-hmm. But I'm not telling the teams what to do unless they're violating the Scrum Guide, in which case I say, okay, Scrum Master, either fix that or you're going to get replaced, right? Right? We can't tolerate Scrum Masters who can't deliver on the Scrum Guide. Similarly for the product owners. So there's where the authority of the management lies, is to get the right person in the right place and then give them whatever they need to function properly.
A few other things that we've seen consistently, this is a great question, to build on what Dr. Sutherland has said, is when teams, and I'm gonna call them developers, when developers are going to meetings, they're almost never attending those meetings for their benefit. It's for the benefit of other people. And so they're not delivering value because they're attending a meeting to update someone so they can write a report or do something with it, make a PowerPoint. The Scrum Master has to protect that from happening. Right. Because when developers aren't developing, they're not producing value. A good way to think about it, and again, it's a great question as we see it all the time, is when you have agile and then you have, we'll call it non-agile, right? Traditional management or what have you. Think about the agile as a developer team, and they're a jogger. They're jogging along the beach. And every time they pass someone who grabs them and stops them and says, yo, what time is it? That jogger's not going to make the progress they could make if they'd have been unimpeded. That's exactly what happens when the team's getting stopped. And the Scrum Master needs to be on top of that. The Scrum Master doesn't need to be a technical person. They don't need to know details about even what the team is developing, right? They're not they're not the product owner. They need to be someone who knows how to protect the team, who studies Scrum, who can coach the team, right? And who can get things done in the organization, right? They're a go-getter because someone's got an impediment. I got you. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a lady. And
so again, let's go back to when Ken Schwaber and I were initially implementing Scrum, particularly in scale implementations. We said to developers, we made it a rule, you go to no meetings unless it's a daily Scrum, sprint planning, review, or retrospective. And if anybody wants you to go to a meeting, they are to come to us. And if we think it's really important, we might allow you to go to the meeting. But other than that, there are no meetings. Middle managers have to stop that. That is their job as a leader of an agile transformation, is stop developers from going to any meetings unless they're the daily Scrum, the sprint planning, the review, or the retrospective. I'm serious, people. You need to listen to this, because if you don't do this, you will constantly be delivering late. Your customers will constantly be complaining, and you have a high probability of failure of your agile transformation.
One last thing I want to add, because Dr. Sutherland's right. This is so important. And the Scrum Master role is so often underestimated in its importance. When I was a Scrum Master, on many occasions, I would have people from the team, the devs, come say, hey, this guy's always pinging me for helping with this, helping with that, right? Work that no one can see. It's not documented anywhere. And that's how most of us operate. It just is. And I finally had to go to this person and I had to say, look, no, if you need something, you go to the product owner. And if you don't want to go to the product owner, then you can come to me and I'll talk to the product owner with you. You're not going to go to this person anymore. They're going to keep saying no. And the person would just say no, no, no. And that person came to me, the requester of the hidden work, and said, look, we're getting held up because we need this. And I said, great. You don't want to go to the product owner and make your work visible. And you're not respecting what I'm telling you as a Scrum Master who's helping the team. I said, so you go talk to this manager, this people manager, and tell them you want the devs to stop working on what they're doing and work on your stuff. And I already had buy-in from managers whenever I'd go. I need to know you're 100% committed, because if they're lukewarm, it will not help. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing lukewarm management who won't support the effort of an agile transformation. It's 100% or it's going to fail eventually.
Yeah. So I am going to throw one thing out there, because of course we've seen in the chat and I applaud you all for pointing this out. Refinement as well. Backlog refinement is an important thing. However, backlog refinement is not an official Scrum event. It's a leading practice that we strongly advise everyone to do. But I don't want those in chat who pointed out that Jeff did not say refinement to think that we're excluding it. He's being very precise, which those of us who work with Jeff every day know that is a usual thing. But
let me make
go ahead.
Let me make a comment on the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide has been streamlined now, so it's really short. And the only way to make it work well is to use the patterns that we teach in our registered Scrum training that are in the patterns book that are essential. And one of the patterns is ready backlog. If your backlog is in a ready state, we have many case studies showing that your velocity doubles. So if you don't implement that pattern, you're going to have a dysfunctional Scrum. Okay, so that's another thing that people don't understand. Implicit in the Scrum Guide are these patterns, but because the Scrum Guide itself has been shortened to now, I think it's 11 pages, it has to be augmented by the patterns book, and specifically the performance patterns for Scrum, one of which is ready backlog, which is where the refinement comes from.
So, gents, I want to step back here because we've got a huge number of questions. And again, thank you, everyone who have submitted your questions. We will answer as many as we can, but a lot of these we're going to bucket together. So you may not hear your exact question, but you'll see the themes just to make sure we can get the most in-depth answers. And one of the themes that we're seeing here, and this is more big picture back to Rocket Mortgage, is that the executives saw great results with their SAFe implementation. Everybody's in agreement. It was a successful SAFe implementation. So what drove them to go further, especially with client marketing, which is their money making, it is the heart of their business. It's that customer interface. It's what drives the money.
Well, the customers are asking for 4 times as many changes as they're able to implement with SAFe. We hear that everywhere, okay? Like John Deere, we're just doing a case study for them. They have the biggest farm machinery, biggest and oldest farm machinery, at least one of the biggest and oldest in the world. They were doing it for 9 years, but they only got a 20% improvement, and the customers are asking for more than that. So they implemented Scrum at Scale on top of SAFe, just like Rocket Mortgage. And if you look at their stock price during COVID, it went up more than Amazon. Their stock price went up 300% by delivering 4 times as many features faster, right? I mean, so this is why people need to amp up, okay? The competition globally is getting more and more intense. Yeah. And the fact that most of us have to work remotely has crippled any waterfall taste or smell in your organization. In a remote environment, the organization becomes crippled. That's why thousands of companies have gone bankrupt in the United States. I don't know how much in Europe and the rest of the world. Thousands. Even some of our biggest companies have gone bankrupt because they can't be agile. Okay. This is why what we're talking about is so important, and it's so important to get it done in a way that actually works, which is what we're talking about here.
One of the things I'd like to make clear, and that was a great question, is Rocket Mortgage, the company, didn't decide to continue the agile journey with client marketing. Client marketing decided to do that. And that's why it was just client marketing.
So that leads us to another question here too, which is interesting. And that's the always important question of leadership participation, not just buy-in, but they are actively involved. Do you know if client marketing had all of that buy-in, or did they face opposition that they had to overcome through change management?
Well, the two leaders of client marketing, the managers, came to not only Scrum at Scale training, but Scrum at Scale train the trainer. They became Scrum at Scale registered trainers. And they said, we're going to go back and implement this. And now that they've demonstrated so much success in the client marketing release train, they're trying to move this into other release trains as well. So I would say there's a company initiative to spread this success using Scrum at Scale to tune up the SAFe implementation.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thanks. So no Agile transformation will work from the bottom up. It has to be supported 100% from the top, or it's just going to get pushed back to the point of failure, as Dr. Sutherland said. The only thing that changes is how long until it collapses.
Okay. We've got some questions too, and I know we're starting to run a little short on time, but there are a number of different questions about this approach that you document so well here in this white paper of layering Scrum at Scale on top of a SAFe implementation. One of the themes that we're seeing is if you have a SAFe implementation, is it better just to switch over fully to Scrum at Scale, or should they continue their SAFe journey and just layer it on, evolve it, as it were, using the Scrum at Scale model?
That's going to have to be determined by the company. At Rocket Mortgage specifically, since they had a global Scrum SAFe implementation, the management didn't want to do everything at once. So they said, let's focus this on client marketing. Let's keep the terminology the same as much as possible so we don't disrupt the rest of the company.
And what about interaction points? I mean, this is so important. It's one of the features we always talk about with Scrum at Scale, where if you're in a dual operating model, it's not just about assigning responsibilities or accountabilities. It's making sure that in a dual operating model, you have the network and the hierarchy, and they have set interaction points to make sure the business gets done. In this implementation, if we swap out hierarchy and network for SAFe and Scrum at Scale, were there set interaction points? And if so, how did those work?
Okay, so the dual operating model, you need to read Professor Carter's work, because he says the dual operating model means the agile piece is totally agile, and the management is agile. And in Scrum at Scale, the management is doing Scrum themselves. And it's not being managed by the hierarchy. They're reporting to the hierarchy. They're reporting to the results. And I've worked with, actually, I think it was like the second or third biggest company in the world, big German insurance company. They said, we want to go agile, but obviously we're huge. We can't do all at once. Maybe 10% we can get started on. There's certain thing that the 10% agile need from the 90% waterfall, how we handle that. I said, you need to start training the waterfall people so that they can respond to events. They need an agile buffer when the agile piece of the organization has an important thing they need done. The waterfall needs to respond immediately to what's put in that buffer. So I said, senior management, you need to train waterfall to immediate agile response to a buffer of agile tasks.
Sure. And Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just in the interest of time, and I'm guessing the way I phrased the question was not a great one, so let me rephrase it. I was using the network and hierarchy as a model. The question is actually about, is there interaction points between the SAFe implementation and the Scrum at Scale implementation, or is it just they become one?
So with with client marketing, what they were doing is their interaction at SAFe was at the PI planning event. That's where that bigger interaction came, that periodic PI planning event. And they maintained that for a period of time, and it worked well. The one thing they realized they needed to do was make these decisions faster instead of waiting for PI planning. And that's where they moved to the Scrum at Scale Meta Scrum model. And so that was the interaction point. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you. And again, Jeff, I apologize for having to interrupt. The last question we have time for, and this is always a fun one. There's been lots of questions of Can this work in research? Scrum at scale, even on top of a safe implementation. Can it work in research? What about the fact that this is a highly regulated environment? Obviously, Rocket Mortgage is a highly regulated environment. We have just a couple minutes left, gentlemen, but I'd like to hear your thoughts about Scrum at scale, or a safe with Scrum at scale implemented on top implementation and the particular nature of highly regulated industries.
Well, and you asked about research. If you Google Scrum and research, you'll find hundreds of examples. One of the best examples is Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, which is the #1 Navy research lab. They do nothing but research. And they were constantly asking me to go down there and do Scrum training. And I was down there, and the senior manager took me out for lunch. I said, why are you doing Scrum? You just get all this money from the government. You get $1 billion a year from the government, and why do you even care? He said, every time we do a research project with Scrum, we get twice as much done, and the quality is much higher. And that gives us a competitive advantage going after the next research grant, because the government purchasing agents, they notice they get twice as much from us, and it's much higher quality, and they give us more money. Now, so maybe the question is directed, how do you do it in research? And definitely the way you manage backlog is a little different. For example, we work with almost every biotech in Cambridge, which is like a biotech headquarters for the country. And if you're doing DNA sequencing, then it's a little different than doing a piece of software, right? So that there are papers written on this. How do you do DNA sequencing using Scrum? Or maybe you have a different type of research. But the bottom line, as John Hopkins pointed out, is that if you get the PhDs talking every day, even if they're in different domains, a chemist can ask a mechanical engineer, why are you doing it like that? Over here we tried this. And then all of a sudden, these high-powered minds are amping up the quality of the research. Second, if you monitor the research in the Scrum way with a Scrum and you time box everything, you get twice as many stories done automatically with Scrum. So the superior research and the increase in velocity of delivery, it works the same as research as it does anywhere else. It's just the way you manage backlog is a little different in a research setting. So I would recommend you Google Scrum and research. There are many Scrum boards and research online. You can look at what they're doing in different universities, stuff like that.
And two other things.
Actually, Michael, I really hate to say this, but we have hit our time box here. So I'm going to stop you there because we started in on time, and that includes webinars. So my apologies. So I want to start off by saying, Michael, thank you. Jeff, thank you for your presentation today. And thank everybody who joined us. The questions were phenomenal. We will be posting this on agileeducation.org. And a reminder for everyone who's out there, and Michael, if you could go to the next slide, please. We had a lot of Scrum Master questions. We do have our new course, Scrum Master at Scale. It's on March 10th through 11th. It's virtual. You can find more information at scrumming.com, and that may answer a lot of your questions on this. So please, we're evolving. We're bringing new products. We'd love to see you there as well. Again, thank you, everybody. And we will make sure that you know by email when this webinar recording is reposted. Thanks so much for joining us.